Welcome back to the Mostly Legal Podcast, a show where we tell all the stories of people who make law firms operate. I'm Amanda Copeless, Chief Operating Officer at Sheffield, Lohman & Wilson.
And I'm Rob Joyner, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Centerbase.
If you've ever looked at a financial report and thought, I should understand this, but I'm not totally sure what I'm looking at, this episode is for you.
Today, we're joined by Terrell Turner, CPA and founder of the T.L. Turner Group. He's not your typical accountant. Terrell knows how to translate financial and accounting speak into actionable insights.
Today, we're going to geek out a little bit and talk about everything from phantom income and K-1 confusion to the biggest financial mistakes firms make and how to avoid them. Terrell also shares the key financial reports every firm should be reviewing and how to use them to drive better decisions.
Plus, we dive into how AI and automation are changing the finance game, why law firm budgeting often goes off the rails, and what every firm administrator and COO should be tracking behind the scenes.
So whether you're deep into firm finances or just trying to figure out what a P&L is supposed to tell you, this episode will help you feel more confident about the numbers.
So grab your earbuds and maybe your calculator. Let's get into it.
Today, we are talking to Terrell Turner, who is the founder and CEO of T.L. Turner Group, a CPA and outsourced accounting firm. I'm sure you do a lot of other things, and we don't read bios on this show, so I will let you fill in all the blanks that I missed there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. So do you want me to start with just jumping in and giving people a little bit more context?
Just give us a little more context on your background. How did you, well, I think one of the interesting things is you didn't necessarily focus on legal to start, but you got into legal. So walk us through, one, how you became a CPA, how you started your own firm, and then how did you stumble into legal?
Yeah, so probably like many accountants, started off working in public accounting, which is very similar to like the legal industry. Graduate law school, worked for a law firm. Like I graduated from grad school, went right into working for a Big Four accounting firm. Doing accounting, I realized I didn't like being on the auditor side. So I took a job with a couple of manufacturing companies. And that's where I kind of learned how to really take the finance and the accounting and actually use it to make business decisions. And so moved around a good bit within the US. And then I took a job assignment down in Brazil. So moved down to South America. Absolute culture shock, but figured out how to navigate. I was
going to say, that sounds fun.
It was. I will say it was an amazing time because I was there the same year the World Cup was in Brazil. So phenomenal time to be there. So I learned a lot, had a ton of fun, and came back to the US, worked for a couple more companies. And one of the things that I specialized in was being able to translate finance to non-finance, professionals or colleagues. And that's kind of the vein that I stayed in. I worked in investor relations for a Fortune 500 company. So on the phone with Wall Street analysts and talking to institutional investors, and which I will say can be a stressful thing, because when you're talking to someone who's debating about whether or not they're going to invest, $500 million in your company, like the tension in that conversation can get pretty high. But it taught me how to translate and make finance and accounting less complicated. And so after doing that for some time and working 90-hour work weeks, my wife and I kind of looked and said, hey, we got married because we actually liked each other. So we need to figure out something.
What's that like? I'm kidding. Love my husband. He's one of the only ones who listens to the show. So I'm just kidding.
Shout out to you, Nick.
Love Nick.
But once we started having that conversation, we were just like, all right, the 90-hour work weeks is probably not the best fit. So one of us needed to make a change. And so my wife is an accountant as well. And she works for Fortune 500 companies as well. And so I'm like, hey, I'll take a step back. And I've kind of always wanted to start my own firm. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to leave my job and start from zero and build a firm from scratch. And it seemed like an amazing idea at the time. And the company I was working for, I was wrapping up a final project for them. The project, I finally wrapped it up on March the 30th of 2020. So April 1st of 2020 was like the first day of being in my own firm. And it
April
was
Fools.
So I'm just like, the timing couldn't have been, I would say, probably any worse. I mean, between April Fools and the start of like everything shutting down due to the, COVID-19 pandemic. But, we figured it out, and we've been, staying steady with it for the last 5 years. And in that process, kind of learned to really look and see, okay, what types of clients can we work best with? And in working with so many different clients, law firms consistently came up as like, hey, I understand their business. I know they need my help. And so we really, so it became like
Amanda's about to fall over in a chair if you're not. If you're not watching us on YouTube.
Listen, I'm a CPA and I work for lawyers. And so this really just, yeah. He's right.
And so you understand.
I understand. Well, so Rob, one of the reasons I wanted Terrell on the show is I heard him speak at a conference that was designed for like for people who are like starting out in legal, non-professional accounting. Like he just wanted to give a 101. And I thought to myself, wow, if he can dumb this down enough for Rob to understand, that I think
I knew a shot was coming. I could see a setup. I could see a shot coming. Well, I'm excited to have you because maybe I can actually learn something on this show if you dumb it down enough.
Okay, so I guess that transitions right into what our first question was: is how do you then like translate some of these complex financial concepts for law partners? One of the two that always get me every year, and this is, I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's very nuanced, but like, how do you explain a K-1 to a W? Like, how do you do that translation for what a K-1 is and what phantom income is? Like, those are the two every single year that get me. But a lot of these things are not as complex. So how do you translate those for firm partners who might not have a strong accounting background?
Yeah, so I would say, it comes on the front end a lot more research of studying, like what are they comfortable with? What are they familiar with? So you end up doing a whole lot of studying them. And it's also a great excuse for me to binge watch a lot of like legal TV shows.
No, don't say that.
Suits.
So, between like Suits, even if you go old school with like Boston Legal.
Oh my God. Every lawyer listening to this just threw something at their radio or
their radio?
Yeah, like if you're listening to a podcast on your radio, like isn't that how people listen to? No, I listen to it.
No, you aged
Bluetooth.
yourself. But after I kind of got over it, I was like, okay, all right. The legal TV shows are probably not the best option, but I think then just really spending some time around lawyers and just hearing how they talk and going to like legal conferences, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. I understand the context. And I think when it comes down to stuff like, a K-1 or like, as you mentioned with phantom income, the biggest question that, law partners have is like, well, why do I have to report this as income to the IRS? I didn't get that money in my bank account. But then having to explain to them like, well, the money still belongs to you. And I think, having to just explain like, okay, the way it works when you are an owner in a law firm, whatever profit goes to the bottom line, like that portion of the profit belongs to you. That's why you get a K-1. It's very similar to if you got a W-2. All the firm is saying is, hey, we made this much money and this is how much belongs to this partner. Now, you probably need to have a conversation with the other partners about like, hey, how much of that can they actually distribute and deposit in your bank account?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's why you probably should have that discussion with the other partners on like how much actually gets distributed. And so I kind of take it from that perspective because I think most partners are familiar with what a W-2 is, but I always tell them like your K-1 is kind of like the partner's version of a W-2, but there are no taxes that are withheld.
And if you're doing it right, your K-1 has $0 in profit on it.
So you mentioned K-1s, you mentioned phantom income. I can't even get the question out because I'm watching Amanda. Are there other financial concepts that you see these partners that you're working with struggle with to understand?
Yeah, I would think the biggest one is that the difference between revenue, net income, and then cash in the bank.
Oh,
because
man.
those, I understand if your background is not accounting, I understand why they can be confusing. But a lot of times when I talk to partners, like they feel very confident in their firm because they're like, we did X amount in revenue. And then I'll ask, well, how much of that was profit? They're like, what do you mean? And they just repeat the same number. I'm like, no. I'm like, no, there's a difference. I'm like, revenue is what came in on the front end. Profit is after all of the expenses. And they're like, oh, well, our goal is just on the revenue number. I mean, it's good to have a revenue number goal, but
Yes.
but I'm like, you do need to understand, like, how much of that do you actually get to keep? And then they're like, oh, I just look at my bank account. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I'm like, we need to do a little bit of work here.
just a tad bit more planning there.
I think you have maybe a micro business in here somewhere, like financial literacy for attorneys starting their own firm.
Oh, for their own firm. Yeah. Well,
yes.
That's a good question.
Or even partners in a firm.
Right. But when you do start a firm, like let's talk about it from that angle. When you do go out on your own, you hang your own shingle. I mean, it's like with any business. If you're starting your own business, these can be really foreign concepts, but that's kind of a niche for you, right? When somebody's just starting out, you can get in and help them kind of set them up for success from the ground up. But what's one kind of crucial piece of financial advice you tell them when they're launching their own practice?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that I've seen that really, trips a lot of people up when they first start is, hey, get 2 separate bank accounts, one for your trust account, one from your operating account. Like, separate those, because I've seen so many law firms that start and they just have one bank account and they're like, oh, we just got this settlement. Like, not all of that money belongs to you. Like, we need to separate like what actually belongs to you.
That seems like such a basic concept to me because they're tested on it.
And you're right. And it is something that I think should be very basic, but it surprises me like how many lawyers that get started don't, because they tend to look at like, oh, well, we ask our clients to pay up front because that's just working capital to help me operate the business. And it's like, what happens if that client, in the middle of the case says, hey, you know what? I no longer want you to represent me. Like, what are you going to do? And they're like, well, I had one lawyer actually ask me, like, they can do that? I'm like, probably, yeah. I'm like, hiring you as their lawyer doesn't mean like you own them. Like, they can leave at any moment.
We have the same conversation around legal technology and implementing technology. I have to remind the team, and I always have, that this is something we do every day, but they don't. Mm-hmm. And so, Amanda, to your point, some things that you think are basic are just so foreign.
Good. Right. No, yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Taking me down a notch. That's hits good.
Not everybody passes the CPA the first time, Amanda.
That's true.
I am definitely one of those people who
nothing
didn't.
with it. And then does nothing with it. Because my CPA stands for can't pass again. Although yesterday I was reviewing our firm's tax return and did find a mistake our CPAs made. So there's that.
Okay.
The concept of trust accounting, right? One of the words that I always struggle with in law firms is the word retainer. And it's like, it's that one word causes so much consternation. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on, like, how can we get that word out of the vernacular? Because in almost every firm, a retainer is not a retainer.
Yeah. So the way I tend to explain this to law firms is like, the way a retainer works is it's like a client came to you and said, hey, can you hold this money for me? Now, some of it I may use for your legal services, but some of it I may actually come back and ask for it back. And so when I explain it that way, they're like, oh, that's why we need to keep it separate. Like, yes, because it doesn't belong to you. Because at any point, if they want to, let's say, end their case, or let's say, they're going through a divorce, and let's say they actually make up with the person that they were divorcing, and now you no longer have a client because they've decided to get back together. Whatever money they ask you to hold, minus your legal fees, like, you're supposed to give it back to them. And if you don't, you could run into issues. And so I always explain the retainer as like, hey, they're asking you to hold on to this money for them. they might come and ask for it back, or you may be able to use some of it to cover the legal fees.
So can I tell you, one of the things that we do is I define retainer differently. I define retainer as if somebody has said, here's a retainer for services, we define that as they are paying you in advance for like representing them for the month, right? I'm going to keep you on retainer. Because when people say those things, that's where it gets confusing. They're like, oh, I'm going to pay you $10,000 a month to help me. I'm keeping you on retainer. But we insist on using the terms advanced trust deposit or advanced deposit, because then that is what indicates it's going into a separate bank account, and state bars require you to put it in bank accounts that pay a very specific amount of interest. It has to be, at least prime. Florida, anyways, you have to keep it in a bank account that pays at least prime interest rates. And you have to, the interest rates, depending on agreements, can go to the client if it's their own account, cannot, whatever. But we have stopped using the term retainer. And I think that has really helped with our clients and with the firm, because now it's an advanced deposit. And then if they actually overpay, then we decide whether it's going to be an advanced deposit or we keep it in what's called prepaid. And if by taking out the R retainer word, it has helped, I think, a little bit.
I can
Rob, did we
definitely
just
see
go
that
too
helping.
deep? Did we just bore you to death?
No, I was sitting here thinking, is Amanda trying to show off? Is Amanda trying to educate us?
No, I'm telling you what we do and how it has helped us.
I'm just poking fun.
I know you are.
Amanda knows her stuff. But accountants, right, Terrell? So if an accountant is interested in supporting law firms, right?
Yes.
They've never done it in the past. I'm skipping questions, Amanda.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just scroll down and figure out where you are in this script.
So if an accountant comes to you and says, hey, I'm interested in supporting law firms, what would your feedback be? What do they need to go out and learn first before they jump in?
I would say first, do not trust legal TV shows as reality.
Is that your redemption?
Yes, I would say
Unless
it is not the reality.
Turn your radio back on.
No, let me age myself again, because Ally McBeal got it right. So unless it's that, sorry, there's a whole bunch of people who are like, Ally McWho? Dancing Babies? What? Sorry.
I'm going to have to add that one to my list, because I will say is just, that would be my first advice. It's like the legal TV shows are for entertainment. It is not reality. So that's the first thing I would say. The next thing I would say is, I think there are a ton of podcasts out there, whether it's, lawyers on it or go to like a conference to actually talk to some lawyers to kind of understand like, okay, what are some of the challenges they have, or what are some of the common questions that they have? And to be honest with you, you can probably use AI and go out there and just ask, what are some of the common accounting questions that lawyers ask? Because I've seen a lot of lawyers, I say accountants who want to work with lawyers. When I speak at conferences, they come up to me and they're like, well, they just see dollar signs when they see law firms, but they're not really aware of like, hey, what are some of the challenges and the help that these law firms and lawyers are going to need from you? And so I would say is don't be arrogant and think that, hey, it's all about you being able to just, take some of their money. It's actually understand the lawyers and understand what types of problems and challenges. And I would say definitely you want to understand trust accounting. Most businesses don't have to do trust accounting, but if you get it wrong, like I've seen lawyers get suspended or their license being temporarily suspended because the trust account got such in whack. So they do want to make sure they understand those things.
I'll tell you my trust account horror story real quick. So when I first started my very first firm, I had a background in accounting. My very first thing was like, what do you mean we're doing cash accounting? I don't understand. Where's accounts payable? Where's accounts receivable? Where's the accrual accounts? Like, what's the bad debt write-off here? Okay. So I was very confused about that. But then my second thing was like, what is this trust account? And our account at the first firm had never been reconciled because the person who was doing the job before me didn't understand it. And so there was a pile of money, and we had a table in a Word document, not an Excel, not anything like that, but a table built into Microsoft Word that explained whose money was what. The dollar amounts did not match. There was $4,000 more in the trust account than was in the table in Microsoft Word. And I was in an attic digging out papers that were covered in dust, trying to figure out. Finally, we got down to the end and we could not figure out which client there's money is. And you have to go to the state bar and you have to get an opinion as to what to do with it and where it goes and how long you hold it. You can't just take it. You can't just say, oh, well, it doesn't belong to a client. It must belong to the firm. You actually have to have somebody say, here's what you have to do with it. And we ended up getting, eventually we were able to pull it and keep it in our operating account. But we had to notify clients, if this is your money, we did provide accounting for every single, it was a nightmare. And I'm just like, Rob, one of the very first skills is learn Excel.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be great at Excel. Now with AI, you don't need to know Excel at all, but tables are not where you keep math.
Okay. We'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Centerbase, legal practice and management software designed to deliver optimal efficiency, profitability, and business growth for your mid-sized law firm. Learn more about how Centerbase helps you practice, manage, and grow your law firm with modern technology at centerbase.com. So you guys have said AI twice, so I just have to jump in and ask and add a question. So are you seeing law firms bring AI into their back office yet, their tech stack, and how are they doing so? Or how do you see them doing so in the future?
Gotcha. So I'll start with that one. I haven't seen them bringing it into the back office as much as I would think that they would.
Right.
And I think part of that is for a lot of lawyers and law firms that I've met, the back office is something that they're not as familiar with. So it's kind of like they're unsure, like, well, how do I, bring, AI into the back office? Because I think they've been so focused on the front end legal work that they're not really sure how to apply it in the back office. Now, in some instances where I have seen some people bring AI into the back office, it may be trying to use AI to kind of help, keep track of, invoices that need to go out, like which invoices have gone out, which ones haven't, so they can kind of find that gap on like, hey, who hasn't paid us yet? Now, that's probably your simplest form of AI because I tend to think about like if you're using any type of practice management software, the search function is somewhat a form of AI. Because you're putting in some keywords, the tool is doing some research, trying to find what is most relevant to what you're searching for. So I would say that's probably the most basic form of AI, but I do think in the billing area, that's probably a good place for people to start working to bring AI into that area.
Yeah, I'm watching out as people start to do things like use it to clean up narratives in their billing entries for consistency, maybe that pre-bill approval process, seeing it come there at some point, helping OCR and enter accounts payable and then go through that approval process and a few others. But I'm interested to see, you're right, a lot of it's been on the front of house, what I'll call the front of house with the attorneys. But I think there's so many different applications that law firms from an administrative standpoint, especially since they tend to be very lean on the number of staff members they have that aren't timekeepers, to help them run even more efficiently. So I'm excited to see what comes there.
Yeah, I agree. And, I was going to say one of the things we're starting very quickly on is when we have massive amounts of data, rather than spend a long time trying to figure out how to translate that into Excel, we might use something to like use the data, like what's the best way to organize this data so that I do this, this, and this. And so rather than take a pivot table or take an XLOOKUP and spend an hour trying to make it work, ChatGPT can tell you exactly what to do in 10 minutes or less, 1 minute or less, and then you can manipulate your data. So that's just something like we're just scratching the surface on. But when you're talking about these finance roles, the specifically people who kind of want to get started in it, so like my billing clerks, or even we have a lot of administrators who listen to the show and who are ALA, who are maybe branch office administrators and the barrier to entry of taking in being a full firm administrator is not having that finance background. So, if we want to transition to that, even if it's small or mid-sized, what type of professional development paths would you recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that you do not need to become a CPA to really understand the role, finance role within, law firm administration. I mean, because to be completely honest with you, the CPA doesn't really prepare you to be a law firm
Can't pass again. Can't pass again.
I mean, and I would say, in all fairness, I mean, I think the CPA was really designed for people who were really gonna audit or do tax work, more so for corporations. And the legal industry, what isn't like part of the natural curriculum. And so I would definitely tell people, now I may be a little bit biased in this because I did do a couple of presentations for the ALA. Like, if Terrell Turner is speaking, like, you should show up.
Listen, that's why you're on the podcast, because I heard you and I knew you were great. Well, you're going to be teaching our finance classes, right? So ALA has a series. I always have to pitch, but we have a series of finance classes that kind of start and teach, 101 basically. And we're looking for a new professor, and Terrell's going to do that for us. So
absolutely. And I do think, like, even if it's not me, I think just someone who has experience within working with the legal industry that can shine some light on things that you don't necessarily understand. I think that's probably going to be your best bet of going through, like, say, a program like that, because you're going to hear from someone who understands the scenarios and the situations of what you're dealing with. They're going to be able to use some of the lingo that you're probably going to hear in the office as you're working, with a law firm. And then also is they kind of know, how to practically apply it, because there's a lot of theoretical accounting stuff you can learn if you picked up a textbook. But the biggest challenge is, how do you take the theory and then you apply it in a real world situation? So I think you can definitely do that. And I think even going back to AI, one of the things that I would ask people to do is just like go into AI and just ask, like, hey, if I'm a billing clerk for a law firm, what are some of the key things that I need to know? And it's going to give you an answer. And if you don't have any other place to start learning it, like, that could be your start to at least give you some kind of list of, like, okay, here are some of the things I need to be aware of. And then I think you can go and you can look up, let's say, podcasts like this, or you can attend conferences. Like I said, I know the ALA has several different sessions and resource tools to where you can start looking at things like that to fill in your knowledge gap. And what you did is you started with AI to give you a list of, hey, here are the things that I need to be aware of, or what are the common terminology that's used in law firms related to, let's say, being a controller or being a CFO in a law firm. And it's going to give you some place to kind of focus your attention to start developing your knowledge and skill set.
you can even go deeper. Your prompt could say, I do this job and I want to do this job. Develop a learning plan for me with day by day, send me resources, tell me day by day skills to learn. Like, it could develop an entire curriculum. So,
especially if you use Claude.
Oh my gosh, especially if you use Claude. Okay. All right. So
it's my turn, Amanda.
It's your turn. I was going to say
my
that.
turn.
I was going to say that, but go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So, Terrell, if you're working with a firm, what are the basic data analytics and performance metrics that you put in place day one or close to? And then if a firm wants to take it to the next level, what should they be tracking and looking at?
I am glad you asked that question, because that's something we've been talking about internally. Like, during the month of March, like, my team came up with this idea and said, what if we did like a law firm KPI, like March Madness? And so we took like 66 different KPIs for a firm. And then we created a bracket and said, okay, all right, who's going to make
Why
it to
didn't
the
I
Sweet
get
16?
to play? Oh my God.
That's really neat.
So I will say this is a topic we've been talking about. Also, I'm doing a webinar for Centerbase on KPIs. So that's one that people should definitely check out. But when I'm working with a firm, I think the first thing I want to know is, one is, okay, what does your annual revenue look like? And then what does kind of average monthly revenue look like? Because I do think that if you're only focused on, well, what do we do annually? You could miss a lot, because there could be a huge seasonality, because if you make all of your money in, let's say, the last 6 months of the year, then the question is, what are you going to do to survive the first 6 months? So I think while understanding like, okay, all right, how much revenue are we generating? And then what does that look like on average on a monthly basis to see those trends? And then I think the other thing is, how much money are you spending? Like, how much does it cost you to actually run your firm? And that's where we look at kind of total expenses and we say, okay, all right, on a monthly basis, how much money are you paying is going out the door to actually run your firm? And I think once you kind of get that basic context, we can understand, are you making money or are you losing money? If you're losing money, all right, we need a completely different strategy. If you're making money, hey, you got a little bit of breathing room and we have some options. But I think that's the first thing you need to know is, are you making money or are you losing money? And then
it seems so basic, but yes. And is it revenue or is it collections?
I tend to look at, most firms are going to be on a cash basis. So whatever their revenue is going to usually match what their collections are. Now, if there's a firm that is on an accrual basis, then specifically we want to know how much money are you collecting is actually showing up in your operating bank account.
I only wanted that distinction because of what we were talking about earlier about how they don't understand what revenue versus collections versus cash is. So I just wanted to pull that out and make sure you're saying it's how much money is in the door in your hot little hands when you say revenue.
And before you go into more of those advanced analytics too, when you're looking at the firm's revenue, how much of that should they be spending to operate the firm? Like what should they be aiming for?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, let's say it depends on what your partner structure is, like whether partners are paid on distribution or whether they're paid as part of payroll. Okay. So I would say, let's say if partners are being paid on kind of a monthly basis, partners receive a monthly compensation. So I would say when I'm looking at that, I would say is baseline, we want to understand, all right, whatever money you take in is usually I'm seeing firms are spending about, probably anywhere from around 80% of what they take in is going to covering costs. And that's like I said, if partners are being fairly compensated on a monthly basis, which means for every dollar you take in, 80 cents is going to covering your payroll, your operating costs, like the rent, software, all of that stuff, paying, the partners, whatever they make on a regular basis. And that means, hey, at the end of the day, there's about 20 cents on every dollar left over that you can either use to invest in the future of the firm or you can distribute it to the partners. It's kind of what I see. But I like to break it down even further and say kind of a good rule of thumb that I'm looking for is, whatever money you take in is or whatever you're paying your employees, is your revenue at least 3 times that number? So let's say if your staff costs, let's say $100,000 a month, then I'm looking to see, hey, is your revenue at least 3 times that? Because
what staff are you adding in there? Associate attorneys? Like what all staff goes into that 33%?
Yeah. So the first thing I look at is I would say I tend to focus on, okay, what do the actual legal team, like the people who actually generate, serve the clients. So if we look at the people who actually serve the clients, meaning all your legal team, your attorneys, paralegals, legal assistants, if I look at them and say, okay, are they generating at least 3 times what they cost? And the reason why I use kind of a general 3X rule of thumb is, let's say, a third of what you bring in covers the cost of your legal team. Another third covers your overhead and your administrative function. The other third is compensation for your partners and covering whatever the tax liability and other administrative things, to where it's that's usually a good general kind of place that I start. Because what I usually find is, if the legal team, the ones that are actually doing the legal work and serving the clients, if they're not generating at least 3 times what they cost the firm, in general, we start to look at it, we realize okay, now we need to look at some of the more advanced things of do they have enough casework? Like, what does their utilization look like? Is this a collection problem? Meaning they're doing the legal work, but we're not collecting the money from clients. And so I think when you start looking at it like that, it starts to kind of, I would say, light up like a board of telling you, okay, all right, here are the areas we need to look into a little bit more and ask some more questions.
I like that. So when you're talking about asking more questions, then other than that, what are some other signs, like early warning signs, that a law firm might be in financial trouble?
Yeah, so I would say the first one I tend to look at is, how many loans do you have on the balance sheet? Because if I can see that, hey, the firm is taking out loans or they're taking out, short-term working capital loans, to me, that's usually a big sign because short-term working capital loans, the interest rates on those are like 20+% at times. So I'm like, if you're taking out expensive loans like that, then I need to understand why, like what's going on, because that is very expensive money to borrow. So I tend to look at to see, okay, are there any loans? What does like the debt structure look like? And then I would say is I start to look next at, if we're good on, like your employee ROI is what I call it, or return on investment, that 3X number. I look at marketing, like how much are we spending on sales and marketing? And is it actually generating new business, or are we just having a good time?
We're just having a good time.
Playing golf.
Because I think that a lot of times, firms may be spending money on marketing. Like they hired this marketing company and they're kind of just looking at the vanity. They're like, hey, I like seeing my face on a billboard, but it's like, is it actually bringing new business in?
Yeah, I like that too. Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, I could keep nerding out all day. We've lost Rob completely, but we have to get to the end of our show now. And so our final segment is called Pitch Your Passion. And it gives you a chance to talk about something you're passionate about. And it could be a cause or anything in your life. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I would say one thing I'm passionate about is getting outside, getting some fresh air. So I've gotten into hiking more because I think it's one thing. It's great to get some fresh air. It's great for getting perspective. And I think it is awesome for just allowing yourself to clear your mind from, the hustle of constantly working, whether you work in a firm, whether you work supporting firms as an outsourcing company, or, whether you work in the legal industry as a, practicing professional yourself. It's just, I think we all do need to take a break from the chaos that can be, our profession or our jobs that we do, or even just taking a break from things that we may be hearing about in the news and stuff like that. And I think really just get some fresh air and get some perspective. So I am very passionate about encouraging people to get out and get some fresh air and hike. And even if hiking isn't your thing, just go for like a walk and just sit outside, sit in a park, sit on a bench, do something, because I feel like when you do get that perspective, it makes your life less stressful and it makes you more enjoyable to be around.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love it. Go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to say we have had another guest this season who said that hiking was his passion. Climb higher, right. President-elect and soon President Travis Armstrong was his passion. And I said the same joke at the time that I cannot relate to that less. Like there's
Terrell, thanks for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mostly Legal Podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
Stay tuned as we uncover more behind-the-scenes stories of law firms with the best minds in the business. And Rob.
Thanks.